So I recorded this podcast on Monday afternoon. It is now Tuesday morning. Patrick Mahomes, a very rich man. Of course he is. It was the most obvious move you could do. You had to pay the man. I didn't know he was going to make that much money, but good for him. He's the best quarterback I've seen through 2 years in all of my years of watching football. Obviously, you were making him the highest paid player of all time. We just thought it would only be in the NFL and not in all of sports. So good for Patrick. Some of the immediate reaction we saw was, I bet Dak Prescott's excited about this. Maybe if he wants to visit Patrick's estates in the offseason, that's great. That gives him reason to be excited. Dak Prescott should not, nor will he get anywhere in the neighborhood of $400 million over 10 years. I don't know that anyone's going to get there for a while. Deshaun Watson's name got brought up as well. Look, Deshaun's very good. No one is Mahomes. No one is close to doing what Mahomes has done. MVP season AFC Championship in his first 2 years in the league. And look, you can sit there and say this and that, and people brought up Trubisky as well, and what a dumb move that was. I won't even bring up the fact that the Bengals took John Ross III, someone you've probably forgotten about by now. The Bengals took John Ross one spot in front of Patrick Mahomes. But whether Mahomes would have went to Chicago or Cincinnati or wherever, I'm not sure we talk about him in the same context we do right now. Is he great? Yes. Is situation extremely important and constantly overlooked, I should say, when it comes to where you're drafted in the NFL? Absolutely. Patrick Mahomes went somewhere he could learn from Alex Smith for a year. He could play under Andy Reid, arguably the best offensive coach in NFL history, I think without doubt top 10. And then he's got that perfect system with Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. They've got Sammy Coates now. Mecole Hardman they plug in last year and is a very good player himself. So when we talk about the draft and we talk about where you go being important, this is the prime example. Patrick Mahomes is now going to get close to $500 million because he went to the perfect place. Had he went to Chicago at number 2, would he still be doing well? I think so. I think everyone thinks so. But would he have an MVP and a Super Bowl ring? Probably not. Probably not. Would Mitch Trubisky be thought about differently if he had went to Kansas City instead of Chicago? Probably. Would he be doing what Mahomes is doing? Absolutely not. He doesn't have that type of talent. He can't fit balls in coffee cans from 50 yards away. But let's not kid ourselves. Andy Reid has never had a bad quarterback, and all of a sudden he suddenly has the most talented guy we've maybe seen in the NFL, I think, in my lifetime. Even Peyton Manning, as good as Peyton Manning was in the regular season for so long, he couldn't avoid the rush, spin out, and do incredible throw the ball sidearm things like we've seen Patrick Mahomes do. I think what becomes interesting for me now is Lamar Jackson on the same trajectory that we see Patrick Mahomes being on. Are we just in an era now where offenses have the advantage, and defenses, whenever we've seen this throughout the years in the NFL, one team will catch up. But it'll be interesting, or one side of the ball, I should say, will catch up. This is what happens when I don't make any notes and I just start rambling on the podcast, which is what I'm doing now. Will we see the defense catch up eventually? Most likely. But will Lamar Jackson have time to kind of do the same things? Because he's got all the tools, right? He won the MVP last year. Patrick Mahomes did it before. He had a great record. He's got a good system, a good franchise, and a good head coach, a veteran head coach who knows what he's doing. That said, I don't want to sit here and act like him or Deshaun Watson or anyone is going to be the next Mahomes, because I just don't think we're going to see it. So that's that. Perfect situation. If you think Dak Prescott's going to get anywhere in that neighborhood, please see a doctor. You're not well. You are not well. Deshaun Watson, we'll see what happens. Bill O'Brien, not exactly Andy Reid, not exactly John Harbaugh, but best of luck to you, Deshaun. Fun times to be an NFL fan. Fun times to be Patrick Mahomes. Think you're having a good year financially? He just signed a contract worth up to $500 million. Maybe you should have went to Texas Tech and played quarterback. All right, appreciate everyone tuning in. Here is the rest of the episode. I had fun with this one, so enjoy the entire 2-day-long, stitched-together, good old football podcast. Hello there, and welcome to the Good Old Football Podcast. I am Matt Edwards. I am your host. I am your friend, your buddy, your pal. Today we will talk about how this Major League Baseball season might appeal to NFL fans more than ever. Plus, what you should never forget about Washington, D.C.'s NFL franchise, regardless of what happens this summer. And a little food for thought on those squeaky clean do-gooders up in New England. We all know about them, right? But first, let's start with that. I've been saying for the last 20, 30, 40, 50, 85 years, Major League Baseball season is too long. No one under the age of 60 has time for it. No one has time to watch 162 games a year in their entirety. A lot of people have proposed dropping it from 162 to 142 games. I still say that's too long. I've always wanted to see it like slashed in half. Maybe even a little less, somewhere between 60, 80 games, right in there. And you're probably wondering why I'm talking about baseball on this football podcast. But the reason is, this is what makes football so popular. There's not that much of it to go around. In the NFL, most fans only get to see their team play 16 times in a year. That's such a small amount of days in a year. And in college, it's even less than that. If you're lucky, you get to see your team play 12, 13, 14 games. In the NFL and college football, every game counts. That's always been what's drove me crazy about baseball. It's every game doesn't count. Teams can lose 6 or 7 in a row, and really, as long as it's before July, you can dig out of that hole. It's no big deal. In football, I mean, forget 6 games. You lose 3 in a row in the NFL or 4 out of 5, and you have to be close to perfect the rest of the season to keep your playoff hopes alive. And in college, for the big programs who are looking to win national titles, 2 losses on the season, and you're just about done for the college football playoffs. You can enjoy the Campbell's Pork and Beans Bowl this year, played in Fort Wayne on Christmas Eve. You lose 2 games in college football, the odds of you getting into the playoffs, which if you're one of those major programs at this point is the only goal, kiss it goodbye. And that's why we go crazy for all of these games in the NFL and in college football, because every one is so crucial that as a fan, you have to watch. Every game is a can't-miss game in the NFL and in college football, at least when your team's in the hunt. So this year in baseball, let's say I used that number 6 games earlier. In baseball, typically you could lose 6 games in a row, no big deal. This year, that's 10% of your regular season. And maybe every game doesn't count in baseball this year, but every series certainly does in the 2020 Major League Baseball season. And I think baseball ratings, for multiple reasons, but because every game is so important, will be huge this year. And I think that's why NFL ratings are so huge every year. Any games will be huge right now in any of the major sports because we're starving for sports. But I will argue if the baseball season were always like this, you wouldn't see stadiums in Major League Baseball 80% empty on occasion like we do. Can you imagine how absurd Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati would be if the Cubs or Cardinals only came to town once a year? Or say Fenway if the Yankees only came once a year? A home and home like they do with divisional opponents in football, that's all you got every year? They would tailgate for baseball games. But right now, you play your divisional opponents 24 times in a year. It's watered down. In the NFL, unless you meet in the playoffs, you don't meet your divisional rivals 24 times in a decade. And that's why the NFL owns a day of the week, and baseball has playoff games on Tuesday afternoons. There's such a higher demand when these games are absolutely crucial. And I think baseball's got a shot at, kind of using that NFL model this year in that sense. I mean, obviously things are going to be different. I don't think this will have any long-term impact on baseball, by the way. But in my opinion, this is maybe going to be the most exciting season of my lifetime. Certainly seems like it has everything it needs to be to do that. We talk about the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa summer. Of course, that 30 for 30 recently brought up how exciting that was. This easily has the potential to be the most exciting Major League Baseball season since then, and it's because the same reason football is so popular. Every game is going to matter. You get off to a bad start this year, just like in football, that might be the end of it. Pressure is on from the time you get out of the gate. I mean, the Nationals, who won the World Series last year, I believe they had a losing record at the 60-game mark last year. Let's take the first half. Take it easy. Figure it out in the second. You can't do that in baseball this year. And I get the argument of, well, the best teams make it in because there's a massive sample size. That's great. Think the NFL's worried about that? You think the NFL lost ratings and lost money because the 2007 Cleveland Browns went 10-6 and didn't get in the playoffs? They were probably one of the best 6 teams in the AFC. They had 10 wins. This happens all the time. I'm excited for baseball. We'll see if there's any, maybe if baseball likes what they see with the TV ratings. It's tough to tell because you're not going to get the fan attendance. That's another thing. Again, if the Cubs only came to St. Louis once a year or the Dodgers only went to San Francisco once a year, those ticket prices are going to be a lot more than what we see right now. The revenue, you're not going to be able to compare it. I don't really care to compare it. I'm just saying from a fan's perspective, I've always thought that baseball needed less. I've always thought that less is why football gets more, and we've got a chance to see that in Major League Baseball this summer. It is the summer, the end of the month, I guess, is what I should say. Back to purely football now, and someone I've talked about on this here podcast before. One Daniel Snyder, owner of the NFL team in Washington. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name anymore. Maybe we just shouldn't. I've always thought that the intent behind the word shouldn't matter as much as the word, and but whatever. I'm just not going to say. I'm someone who firmly believes in, minimizing harm. Did that in journalism school. If you don't need to say something, don't say it. And, you know what I mean when I say the NFL team in Washington. Dan Snyder, once again, proving that he probably isn't too cool of a guy. Just change the team name. That way I don't have to have awkward segues like the one I just had, dude. I am firmly in the camp of maybe we're going too far on trying to be PC with a lot of things. Actually, with a lot of things, we definitely are. Maybe not everyone who said one thing wrong or offensive should be labeled as this demon and have their career destroyed, but this one is just obvious. And Dan Snyder didn't name the team. I don't know if it's offensive. It sure seems so. Not to me, but I'm just a white dude from Ohio. I don't know. Not to everyone it's not offensive. Maybe to everyone on Twitter because that site is essentially only for crazy people anyways. But at a minimum, even if you're in the camp of, well, we can't be PC all the time, don't you just think the name is kind of odd? Think about today if a new NFL franchise came about and they were called the Portland Whiteskins or the Salt Lake City Blackskins. Wouldn't you stop and say, what? Did I hear you right? Is that an Onion article? Don't you think that's weird? Don't you just think it's odd that we have an NFL team named after the color of someone's skin? And this isn't a new issue, by the way. Everyone who pays attention knows that this isn't something that's come about in 2020 during this social unrest. If people say for a long time and they have, hey, this isn't cool, the whole name thing, maybe you need to realize that. Maybe you need to listen and realize, indeed, it ain't cool. There are names out there. Red Tails seems to be a front runner. I also like, actually, I don't care what I like. Just change it so we can stop talking about it. And by the way, if you're out there and you're indifferent on Dan Snyder and Washington, just remember, it took them going after his bank account to make this happen. He's not doing this out of the kindness of his heart because he thinks it's a good thing. He's doing it because FedEx and the other sponsors that I can't remember right now, I think maybe Pepsi or Coke or whichever one sponsors them, said, hey, maybe let's change things up here. Maybe not have your mascot be a species of human being. We'll see what happens there. Seems like the name will change, but, come on, just deal with it. And by the way, if you're in the sport, that's another thing. People are like, I won't root for the team anymore. Did you start rooting for the team because you liked the mascot? Are you 6 years old? Just chill. Who cares what they're called? They're grown men who put on helmets and run into each other as hard as they can every Sunday. Enjoy the game. Now, look, I know it feels like forever ago, but I have not done a pod. It was actually only a week ago. I have not done a podcast since one Cameron Newton signed with the New England Patriots. I just have two quick thoughts on it because I know it's been discussed a lot. Thought one, the amount of people calling Bill Belichick a genius after this signing is absurd. If it was such an obvious move, why didn't he do it earlier? But everyone wants to go out every time he does something and act like, oh, old Bill with the ace up his sleeve. They're the most quarterback-needy team in the NFL, and suddenly we're supposed to praise Bill Belichick for doing something the general public thought he should do. For something that Steve the plumber in Connecticut thought seemed like a good thing. When he does it, he gets 0 retweets. When Bill Belichick does it, he's a genius. And secondly, B, the next take. I won't be shocked if Cam Newton never takes a snap as a Patriot. Whether he's traded or released or there's no season or whatever, there's a million things that could happen. But it could just be a very New England-like move to get rid of him before the actual season starts, when it starts. Now, a lot of people said the same thing about Randy Moss before the 2007 season, and then he went on to have the best season of any wide receiver ever. But, different story, different time. Maybe they're waiting to see if a quarterback gets injured, then they can flip Cam for a 4th or a 5th round pick. There are a bunch of snakes in New England, so they do stuff like that. Don't ever forget that. But they talked a lot about how much they really built up Jarrett Stidham for them to suddenly kind of be like, yeah, maybe we should sign a guy that everyone's going to expect to start. We'll see what happens. And look, part of the reason they signed Cam, to cover up the slap on the wrist from recording the Bengals sideline. And by the way, I didn't really, the punishment's whatever. What are they going to do? I'm just glad the NFL acknowledged it. But there were a lot of people out there with this take that, well, anyone in the stands could have done that with their iPhone. One, no, they couldn't. Your iPhone cannot pick up details from that far away. I shot video professionally for nearly a decade. I know this. And two, and more importantly, the point is not the crime. It's that, again, Bill Belichick, who gets praised for knowing the rule book so well he manipulates it on the field, once again, knowingly broke the rules. And, I started to think with this, for me, I think eventually, and I think Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time, but I think eventually we need to have the conversation that Tom Brady's legacy may be a little bit tarnished given his accolades all come with the organization that we know cheats. We know they do. So we know about some things. Imagine the things we don't know about. Take that with you. Chew on it a little bit. All right, that's all we got. We're going to be back in 2 weeks. So today is the 7th. Be back. I don't know. Just subscribe. I'm not going to sit here and do the math. Just please subscribe. You notice anytime I end with New England, I end angry? There's a reason. It's what happens. So who knows what will happen by the next time we have a podcast. I was going to do an emergency pod for Cam, but I mean, I'm just busy doing things. So it's a good old football podcast. If you like it, tell your friend, post it on Reddit. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I am at Matt Edwards. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I haven't posted anything on Instagram in like 5 years. It's really not been that long, but what are you going to do? Post from your apartment that you're sitting in? Post a picture of yourself with a mask on? It's not all that much fun. Anyways, we'll see what happens. Things are changing daily. Here's the thing. We talk about things are changing daily, but they're really not. We have different ideas of what might happen every day, and we have different theories and analysis on how the season's going to go. The good thing for the NFL is they can look at what baseball and basketball does and see, we're going to be all right, or, we're in trouble. Figure out one way or the other. It's a good old football podcast. I'm Matt Edwards. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks.